Hi, folks. Welcome back. Another great day here in the real estate world. We've got a great show for you today. There are people out there that just think their house is a house. It's a box, it's square footage, it's wood or it's stone or something like that. There are other people who care about architecture, who care about aesthetics, who care about design. My guest today is one of those people. He's an architect and a master builder. And I think the two combination of that is really very important. I'm so happy to have David Supple from New England Design and Construction as my guest today. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's I love the idea of an architect master builder. And I know that's part of your website at nedc.com.
Yes.
That I have been in this business a great deal of time. You've got builders who come with plans that they buy, and how about this cookie cutter or that cookie cutter. I have architects who design things, and they dish it off to a builder. It's not always what you want. And one of the things I point out is light switches. You know, an architect and a designer, someone thinking about it, puts those light switches in the right place. A builder puts it where, it works for them.
Yeah. Yeah. You can kind of tell, even if you drive by a street, you can tell the homes that were, more thought out versus, kind of just put together, plug and play. And, uh, and so it does make a difference.
It absolutely does. And we have so many examples of that. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright, everybody trots him out. He was just one.
Yeah.
But talk to me about your personal sensibility and why people come to your company, David Supple.
Yeah. I have a background in architecture. I came up through that. And it never really made sense to me. I graduated, I started to work as an architect, and I felt extremely insecure and deficient because I had never built anything. And yet my job was to tell folks what to build and how to build it. And it didn't make sense to me. And so, in terms of a design sensibility, just to answer that question, I really tend to look at, if there's a building there, what is the building, and kind of, if we're going to, a lot of the work we do is renovations. A lot of the, housing stock in the area is older, and so a lot of the time that historic structure is worth salvaging, and was done at a time where design principles were well thought out. They every if it was from a certain era in New England history, those buildings were built by this designed and built by the same entity. It's not really understood today that that is true, but it very much is. The architect and builder did not split. They were one and the same up until the mid late 1800s. Uh, and I am an expert on that subject, so we can get into that more if you want. But um, in terms of my sensibility, I really look, for the, what's there, and then I love the new and old. I love, love, love mixing those effectively, um, and well, because I think when that is pulled off well, you respect and can kind of praise the original structure, but add, and let the new facet of it kind of stand for itself while still integrating into it. That's probably my personal favorite.
Well, and I want to go a little further with that since I help people buy and sell properties. Some of the things that you're right about the older homes. I always think 1880 to 1920 were what this area that was just it was built really well,
Mm,
and you
hmm.
know maybe it wasn't the architect builder, but they were designed well. The craftsmanship was great,
Yes.
but those houses structurally are awesome. But their windows are old. Their electricity, their
Hmm.
plumbing, all of those things need to be upgraded. But you don't have to change the basic design of
Hmm.
the architecture. And those kind of rehabs, I think, are absolutely wonderful. And from my
Yeah.
perspective, they get the most money. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I prefer those than a lot of new construction. A renovated home, historic home that is like new. It's really hard to get that, and so I would agree with you. That era, which you speak of, was close enough to the separation where there was still a strong connection, and the architects knew how to build. So while they may not have been, on the site building, there was enough connectivity and
right.
integration. Um, you get a few generations later where the separation, the chasm kind of grew, and there was more disconnect, less accountability from both parties, and you know you get to after the 40s, there's this era where you really start to see issues.
Well, I think, specifically after the 40s, I mean,
Yeah,
I would say late 40s when the greatest generation or whatever that's called came back from the war,
yeah,
there was a need for Quonset huts. People
yeah,
needed, places, and they were, many of it were just thrown up,
yeah,
and it kind of began that whole separation from the architect from the builder. Hey, I'm building a house, so I can build you a house in 4 months,
yeah.
and but what house and what design and how does one room connect to another? So let's talk about that just for a moment. um, we were in the era of everybody wanted open, but since COVID, now people, the buyers that I deal with every day, the
Hmm.
buyers are looking for separated rooms. And part of that I think is funny because, oh my God, I don't want to see you every day for 24 hours. So give me a separate room here. I don't know if that's true or that's just,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some. It's particularly for like offices, gyms, rooms where they're more in demand now because folks are at home more
yeah,
often.
yeah,
I think in general, our clients still want a kind of a main hub where there is, a good amount of connectivity to adjacent rooms, if not, you know, all one big open space, but what there is a connection and a flow
right.
that works well, and that's something we look at when renovating an older home that is more in demand now in terms of how we live. A lot of the kitchens from that era. It's a great example. I mean, that was not meant to be seen really. So whereas now it's often you know the hub. It's really what the rest circulates around.
And anybody who's ever had a party at a house knows you end up in the kitchen, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
whether it's small and horrible or not,
yeah,
that's where the food is, that's where the drinks are. Um, uh,
yeah,
but
yeah,
but
yeah.
the connectivity, I mean, it can be kitchen to dining area, but it was mostly kitchen to family area. And that they might have also used it as the dining area, but it was
Hmm.
family area. So you could see your family, if you were
Yeah,
in the kitchen.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
um, but now it's changing again, and it's always going to change. Let me ask you, what is classic, classic, classic? No matter what the trends are, what are some of the classic things that, I mean, New England, everybody, not everybody, but vast majority center entrance colonial. And yet ranches built into the land, are also can also be beautiful.
Yeah, they can be. Proportion, scale, in terms of just the aesthetic of it, those are really tantamount. There is a, uh, what you see in nature. It's really what you see in nature is what great design embodies, because nature, somebody thought that through. And if you go back to antiquity, that's what they pulled these design principles from. It was from nature. They observed and found commonalities in proportions of nature, uh, and then you know uh, emulated that in actual physical form. And those principles still hold true. I mean, there's symmetry in
Right.
nature naturally. So
Right.
uh, I think, and that's those design principles and the theory behind that. If it's not taken into account, a home could be really functional, but is missing that beauty,
Right.
and which has a function to it
Right. Right.
by itself. And,
Right.
and so it's really important to have that period of thought, which is what the design process is really for, is just
Sure.
think things through. And with the individual client's vision, but there
Right.
are principles that one does want to follow to ensure a successful outcome.
Sure. Now, not an architect, but a student of architecture and design. It actually started many years ago when my father was a home delivery milkman. So I used to, as a kid, go into people's houses, and I was always fascinated. We didn't roam around the house. I went into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, see, oh, they need milk and butter, and do that. But at an early age, getting to see how people decorate and what they do and what that means. But that's not my question. That's just part of my history. Um, my question has to do, there was a period of time when architects designed the room, like I want a library and that library is going to have morning light because that's where I'm going to be reading. I want my bedroom to have also morning light, but I want my family room to have sunlight, or my family room or living room or whatever that would be to have sunset light. And they would design rooms, and then they would figure out how to put all that together, and the outside wasn't as important. Now, I've seen
Hmm.
some of those houses. They're crazy from the outside, but on the inside, it's really fascinating how it feels to walk around, and everything seems to be where it's supposed to be. Um, we somehow lost that sensibility of that. Um, but when you begin to design, if you're doing a rehab, you've already got a structure. But if you're building something, do you think of the rooms individually, or do you think of them as a whole and start in that approach?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really starts. I think it should be thought with both ways, and for me, I really start with the client and their vision, and understanding the context of the site
Yeah.
to their vision, and because how folks live and what's important to folks is different,
Yeah.
and so what they're that will dictate to a large degree where we go
Yeah.
with the design,
Yeah.
because we're not designing for ourselves. We're designing for uh, a client,
A family.
and and so that's really where we start. And then asking, just really trying to step inside their head. Literally, that is my initial goal. There's phases of design, and initially I'm really just trying to get to know that client well enough where I have achieved this point where I can walk forth kind of carrying their vision with me, and but have their lens with my
Right.
um,
Right.
with my skill set.
Right. Right. I have a question I started early on in my career, and I ask everybody, uh, tell me about a favorite room you had growing up and why it was your favorite room.
Oh, that's a great question.
Isn't it? And you get,
Yeah.
what they do is they'll remember. Well, the answers I got are, I loved my bedroom because it just woke up and it was so beautiful with the sunlight and all of that. That tells me I need east facing bedrooms.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
somebody else would say, we all gathered around the dining room table, and that's where our friends were, and the sun was, that tells me in where that place is situated in the house. And then
Yeah.
I begin to look for that, because if that's the first thing they say, that's the first thing I want to find for them, because I already know what they like. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's fascinating what people say. And then I ask them where was that place, and how was it close to transportation and that kind of stuff. Could you walk to
Hmm.
school? Could you walk to school? Now again, with rehabs, all of that's predetermined, but it's still an interesting um, discussion, I found, because it gives you an
Yeah.
insight.
No. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the times, particularly on first floors, we look at the floor plan as a blank slate. So it isn't as predetermined as you might suspect. And I think one, uh, you know, maxim that people who watch HGTV a lot is like, oh, the kitchen, the plumbing can't change. But when you're doing an extensive renovation, everything is new anyway. So to put it, 20 feet away, it does not really, make a huge difference.
A case in point is a uh, geez, I lost the word, but an island. So I just finished a deal, and they had an island there, but they didn't have a dishwasher anywhere. So I said, well, when we buy this, why don't you guys put your dishwasher in this island? Because you have so much cabinetry around, you don't need this island with all the stuff where you have to bend over to get your Bosco. Do they even make Bosco anymore? Uh, but
Yeah.
uh, but that was a good spot. And they said, "Well, oh, that's a big thing." I said, "Follow me downstairs." And I went downstairs and I saw where the stacks were.
Yeah.
Stacks mean that's where the plumbing is. So it's a connection, and it was no more than 4 or 5 feet. That's not a hard thing to do. Uh,
Yes.
Now, I made it sound like there's only one pipe. There's more than one pipe when you have a dishwasher, but uh, but it all of that stuff is only traveling a little bit of distance, and it's not that expensive to do it. And then you have what you want. And that's what architects do. Architects look at what you want and figure out a way to get it done in an aesthetic and a functional way.
That's
Uh,
right. And architects who build, which we pride ourselves on, also provide you with the cost as part of the decision making process. And I think
right.
that's something with the separation of the architect and builder, which is just one of the things. There's several, but
Yeah.
that is a really inefficient way to go through the design process, not discussing cost and
Yeah.
just making decisions solely on, aesthetic or functional needs without it
Mhm.
being grounded in what the difference in cost is, because you are bound to then revisit those decisions once cost does become apparent, or which typically is at the end of the design process, and you have very detailed developed drawings. And it's not uncommon for us to get calls where folks have gone through this, lengthy, spent, a fair amount on the design services, but it's not a feasible project. And so, you know, uh, it's a lot more efficient to have cost be part of the decision making process as you are going through it.
Early on.
Yeah, I
Early
mean,
on.
starting out, I that's the initial discussion I have is really, and part of what I think I've developed is an ability which is not super common today, but to, have the theory and, knowledge of design while knowing what things cost. So in a short amount of time, I can kind of curate a project and provide sketches and kind of basic outline of a project with, it's not going to be a fixed cost, but, order of magnitude to really, help a client understand
Right.
the full scope of it.
Right. Now, I kind of want to switch gears on here because we're bringing up price, and everybody is a little bit, especially the younger people, late 20s, early 30s, people who getting into this for the first time. They're environmentally aware, want to be energy efficient, and that comes at a cost. And I mean, like LEED certification,
Hmm.
that ain't cheap. You
Hmm.
know, that gold star that you have for LEED certified home is very expensive, and that gets passed on
Hmm.
because it's expensive. So solar panels, well, all of our appliances are so much more efficient. You don't have to go to the absolute most efficient. Um, Having a house that is, I don't know how to say it, not hypoallergenic, but the airflow is curated, so there is nothing
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
That's an expensive process, you know.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it can be, there's different gradients to it. If you're, if it's new construction, it's a lot easier. And, Massachusetts is the leader in the country for the energy code. It has developed and it's been adopted by the country now. And so Massachusetts is the forerunner in that regard. And but there's, if you're dealing with an existing home, with which most folks are, you know, there's typically something that you can do that doesn't cost a ton of money that makes a big difference. And so what we do on all our projects is what's called a blow door test with an infrared scan.
yeah,
And we do that in our analysis early first design phase.
explain that a little bit. I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
I'll bet
So
our
so
audience doesn't.
a blow door is literally a fan that is stuck in instead of you open your front door and we stick a fan and seal it all around the fan, close all the doors and windows in the rest of the house, and the fan sucks the air out of the house, and it creates a negative air pressure. And so wherever there is not insulation or a lack of air sealing, air will rush into the house and it will be visible with an infrared camera. You basically can see through walls. Now's the perfect time of year to do it because of the differential. It's colder outside, you have the heat on inside. So when this cold air is rushing in, you see it very clearly.
Exactly.
And inevitably, there is some, culprit, major culprit in your home that this will identify. A lot of them are common, like where your foundation, what's called the sill plate, which is like the bottom of your wood house, where that sits on your foundation. That typically is where a lot of energy is lost, where a lot of heat is lost, and so um, these things can be identified and then more pinpointed, as opposed to like, oh, where do we start? We've got to replace all our windows. We've got to, this really lets you come up with a plan to get from where you're at to, as energy efficient as possible. And I think one thing we talk about a lot that isn't talked about enough is, the comfort and health, air quality. Those are really, the energy efficiency is great, and from a greater good perspective of the world, and also will help financially over time. But the main thing I think folks should be pursuing these is for their comfort and for their their health in the indoor air quality. And so um, you can have a plan and you can kind of get there gradiently. If you're going for the Uber, passive house certification or lead certification, which we have done, um, that is great and fantastic. And it particularly with a retrofit with an existing home, it will add cost, but there are steps everybody can do
Right.
to improve the energy efficiency, comfort, and health.
Right. Right. I think one of the things, in fact, this is not part of the design build thing, but a lot of people buy properties and they can move right into them. But I always suggest that they get Mass Save. And Mass Save is a state run program funded by energy companies because they want more energy efficiency because they don't have to build more energy plants. But they'll come in at no cost to you and they don't do the blow door test, but they walk around and they give you light bulbs and most of the time, especially with these older houses, they're saying beef up your insulation. And hey, this door, there's a gap like that, and you're losing, all that cold air is coming
Yeah.
in, and um, so
Yeah, they also have incentives for new, heating and cooling equipment, and
yeah,
so, similarly, we advise folks to take advantage of those incentives, and
people
it's
talk
it's
to me
something we do.
all the time, Dave, about Nest and being able to, run your house from your phone.
Hmm.
Going on a vacation, so let's either lower the heat or raise the temperature in the summer, so I'm not running these systems all the time.
Yeah,
And I mentioned Nest. I know there are others as well.
yeah,
Is that really more efficient? Is that a better system?
yeah. I mean, it gives you added control,
Uh huh.
but those can be used with any sort of system. So if the
Yeah.
system is inherently inefficient,
Yeah.
having a Nest is not going to fix that. It's just going to let you control the temperature, easier. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a benefit, but uh, it's not going to add insulation or air sealing or make your heating or cooling equipment more efficient. So
You have
uh,
a phrase on your website, lifting spirits with spaces.
yeah,
I love that. I love
thank you.
that. And back to, I mean, my company's called Your Stories Realty because it's all about you. But I think there are people who buy houses and make them homes. And they want
Mhm.
someone to buy that who feels the same way. I raised my family here. We were all successful. We have so many great memories. I drive by my house. I'm from Pennsylvania. I drive by my house anytime I'm there. I've often knocked on the door and asked, Could I go look at my bedroom?" And
That's
like,
neat. Yeah, yeah. That's our mission statement: lifting spirits with spaces, and that's really that's our purpose is to have the work we do lead to uh, a increase in that person and that family's
yeah,
day-to-day lives and make their lives better through the spaces they use it, where
yeah,
whether it's your home or we spend the most majority of our lives in buildings, and the home is the first and foremost. So it's worth ensuring that it is right and it is
right,
set up for you to flourish and prosper in.
right.
And these projects we do, they're going to be done once. They're
Yeah,
not going to be done twice. So they need to be done right the first time. And it's
yeah.
worth, you know, going through the process and ensuring that in the design process, you're really getting to that right project and getting all the information and comparing and contrasting so that, there's certainty in that.
One thing I hate about this show is how quick it goes. We're
That's a good thing too,
Yeah,
though.
it always feels like I have so many more questions.
Yeah.
But people are watching, and how do they get in touch with you? What's the best
Yeah.
way to?
Our website is NE as in New England, designbuild.com. And we're actually going to have a new site on there soon. But and the company is New England Design and Construction. We're on all the social media platforms. So if you just put that in, you would find us there. We try to put out informative content regularly there. And then my social media, if you wanted to connect with me personally, is David Muniz, Muniz, Supple, and I also put out content regularly.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's I've been on your list for a long time, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed reading about it and learning more. And I think that's the best thing for professionals is share the information. Don't hold back. Let people
Yeah.
know a better way to live. And David, it's been awesome to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for being part of us.
Thank you, Larry. Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So tune in next week for another great show. We'll have another fantastic guest. This was David Supple from New England Design and Construction. Once again, David, you the man. Love having you here. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Larry.